Hi, it's Mary Brownlee, licensed professional counselor. Today we're going to talk about emotional abuse, and specifically 5 ways that emotional abuse can kind of be under the radar and a little bit less well known. Clearly things like cursing at people and calling them names, that is very clearly like verbal and emotional abuse. But the 5 things I'm talking about today will be a little bit more hidden and covert, not necessarily as obvious as things like screaming and yelling and, calling people names. So without further ado, let's get to work here and start to figure out what exactly these more subtle forms of abuse look like. All right, so I think a good place to start, for example, would just be, okay, well, what is emotional abuse, right? Um, Basically, in sum, emotional abuse is a pattern of behavior that instills fear through humiliation, criticism, and control. All right. So, all abuse of all different types is about control at the end of the day. It's not, somebody seeking to have a genuine connection with us due to their own disordered behavior and no doubt trauma history, etc. They're engaging in some really harmful behaviors as attempt to control people around them. So it can be overt, for example, like yelling and name calling. That's kind of what I mentioned already. Or it can be more subtle, like passive aggressive behaviors, gaslighting behaviors, for example. And what I like to say is, in general, a good rule of thumb is if you have to explain to another adult, somebody over the age of 18 or 21, most likely even older than that usually, the basic rules of engagement when it comes to communication, like, if you would just stop calling me names, that would be great. Or can we please talk without you screaming at me? That would be wonderful, right? You feel like you're talking to a kindergartner about being nice on the playground. Yeah, that's your first clue you're dealing with a disordered person. We should not have to tell any other adult around us how to behave. It should be obvious that good behavior and respectful behavior is the norm. But of course, if you're dealing with an abuser, it's not the norm. And you will feel like, oh my God, why is it not obvious to this person that what they're doing is harmful? That's usually your sign that you're dealing with somebody who is disordered. All right, the first one we're talking about now is baiting. All right, what is baiting? I think the most obvious way to explain baiting is if you are on the internet and you're browsing comments on a particular, social media page and you see the trolls. The troll comments that are obviously very negative and nasty and mean and clearly meant to get a reaction out of people around them. Yeah, trolling. That's baiting. So basically, you're purposely provoking another individual to respond in a negative, emotional, or defensive manner. You're making inflammatory comments, for example. You know it's going to get a reaction from the other person, and that's your intention, is to get a reaction from another person. And basically, this is a way to keep victims off balance. Keeps victims on the defense. The abuser gets to maintain the upper hand. The disordered person gets to feel a sense of power and control. They got somebody upset and now they're engaging in, this back and forth, and the abuser's just sitting back going, yes, I've really made this person angry. My job here is complete. So yeah, another example of baiting, for example, might be something like, your partner, maybe you're at a party, for example, and your partner purposely flirts with another person there. And then on the way home, for example, and you try to address it, and they accuse you of cheating. It's like, huh? So they're doing something purposely provocative to get a reaction out of you and deflect the attention and accountability from themselves. Yeah. And then I like to say bonus points to the abuser when they get to call you crazy. So maybe you do get really angry now because they've accused you of cheating, which is clearly not true. You're trying to hold them accountable for flirting in front of you. And now they call you crazy because you're angry and you're having emotional reactions. Yeah, bonus points to the abuser when they get to do that. And I like to say, a good response to this type of behavior is, first of all, not engaging on the same level that they engage. Surely that is definitely not going to be a road to nowhere. But also remembering not to jade. So jade is a term that comes from narcissistic abuse survivor forums and support pages. Jade stands for justify, argue, defend, and explain. So the reason you don't want to jade with any disordered person, and remember, these are repeated behaviors, not just once or twice. These are repeated behaviors that you're observing from the disordered person. You don't want to justify yourself and get into roundabout arguments that go on forever. You don't want to get defensive and continue to try to defend yourself. And you don't want to explain, because the reason is these people are disordered and they have no desire to actually connect with you. This is about control. So when you know you're engaging with somebody who has repeated negative behaviors, don't engage further with them. This is not about connection. It's not about solving problems. They don't actually want to solve any problems. They just want to have control and power over you. Yeah. So that is a really good response to somebody who's attempting to bait you, is ignore them. Ignore them and don't engage with them. All right, the second one is always and never statements. All right, what do I mean by that? So this is where I like to talk about the you guns. It's like they get out the you guns and they're like, you always and you never, you always, never. And essentially, that's an exaggerated statement. Maybe it has a grain of truth, for example. Maybe sometimes you do yell at your partner when you're angry, but it turns into, you always yell at me. That's likely not true at all. So again, very exaggerated. It's very black and white and polarized beliefs and statements. They're not actually based in reality. And again, partners do this, abusive partners at least, or family members, they do this to deflect blame and avoid accountability. So again, they're going to throw the ball back in your court to not take accountability or have the spotlight be focused on them and their inappropriate behaviors. So yeah, we're going to get defensive. It's going to make us feel obligated to fix the problem. And it also is going to make us feel guilty as well. So again, that fear, obligation, guilt. A form of manipulation here. We're getting fogged, so to speak. We're in the fog here where the partner is, or abusive person is making us fearful, by making us defensive. They're making us feel obligated to fix whatever it is that we are always or never doing. And we also feel guilty because now we're in the wrong as well, because clearly we're always and never doing something wrong according to the abuser. And again, the proper response here is not to engage in people who have these type of conversations. They are not productive. And really, these people are not looking to find an objective truth. So you got to remember that, if they were looking to have a dialogue and actually solve a problem and find some sort of middle ground, they would not be using you always or you never statements. So yeah, I hope that's helpful. All right, the third one is belittling, condescending, and patronizing speech. So what do I mean by that? So belittling and using condescending tones and speech and being like real, patronizing people, for example, is a form of passive aggressive speech. So it's masked like nastiness. On the surface, if you were just to say the thing in a neutral tone, it might pass muster. It would be okay, in other words. But it usually is accompanied by some sort of veiled, hostile mockery tone, And again, it's to maintain a facade of niceness and reasonableness. That if a neutral person was somewhere nearby, they might not catch on to the fact that this is abuse. They might just think the person was, joking or something like that. But again, if this is a repeated pattern of behavior, and not just once in a while, it's a repeated pattern that the person does repeatedly, then you know we've got emotional abuse going on here. And so what this looks like is, put downs, for example, backwards compliments. For example, you're so well spoken for somebody from your background. Oh, thanks. I think, yeah, backwards compliments, not fun. Again, these are all about the overall message is that the person is better than you and they're above you and you're below them like you're a piece of doo-doo on the ground. So that's the general tone here. And it's hostile. It's contempt. If any of you have heard of Dr. Gottman and his 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which spell the end of days for relationships, the number one thing that is the destroyer of relationships is contempt. And that's really sneering and looking down and putting the person beneath you like they're a piece of poop. So that's very much what belittling and being condescending and patronizing is. It's contempt. Yeah, and contempt is super, super toxic for relationships. If you want to end your relationship, keep being contemptuous. That'll do it. A way to counteract contemptuous, mocking speech like this, if you feel safe enough and, this person is not someone that's going to erupt in violence towards you, for example, you could ask them direct questions like, I don't get it. What did you mean by that? So, yeah. Or you could ask the person I'm sorry, are you trying to make fun of me? Or are you mocking me? So you could attempt a more direct dialogue like that if you were sure that the person wasn't going to assault you or something like that. Or another good technique is gray rock, for example. So again, pretending that you are just a boring gray rock on the ground, and no matter what happens around that gray rock, it just sits there doing absolutely nothing. And that's basically the smile and nod technique is what I call it. Oh, that's nice. Okay. All right, gotta go now, bye. Where you're not really having any emotional reaction to anything that they do. So those are 2 good responses to this type of behavior. Circular conversations. This one is ever so much fun. This reminds me of the term word salad, which is another wonderful term from narcissistic abuse recovery pages. And word salad is essentially things that abusers and manipulative people do to keep you completely confused and off balance. And, they'll just string you along and blame shift and then move the goalpost. And what about this? Well, when you did this? And before you know it, you don't even know what is up or what is down anymore. And you're just like, oh my God, what just happened there? I was just trying to solve one problem and I literally feel like I'm losing my mind. Yeah, word salad. It's real fun. So circular conversations look like this. It's like an endless argument. You may start trying to get some sort of dialogue going. Maybe there's an issue or a problem. You're trying to have it addressed. And what the person does is not only do they disagree with you, which people are free to disagree with us, right? But it's more than that. It's like they go on the complete defensive with all these other techniques. They put you, back on, where you're feeling defensive and not heard and understood. And you kind of dig in and you're continue to try to explain yourself. And they just go round and round and round somewhere else and switch topics to here, switch topics over there. And before you know it, the conversation is just going round and round and not getting anywhere. So that's the idea of circular conversations. Again, abusers use their feelings as facts. They don't actually base their arguments in factual dialogue. It's really like, if I feel this way, then it must be true. So, for example, if they feel that they have been wronged, then that is the only truth, and nothing you say or do will change that. Even if you did absolutely nothing wrong, which is very much the case with a lot of victims. They did absolutely nothing wrong. But in the abuser's mind, they play the perpetual victim and everybody else is out to get me and everybody's so mean to me. And again, if that's their world and that's how they see the world, that's how they're going to engage with other people. And really, circular conversations, the abuser is not interested in our point of view. They just want to be right. So it becomes like verbal warfare. They're only going to be right, everybody else is wrong, and you can guarantee the conversation is going to go absolutely nowhere productive. So again, some antidotes to this is don't try and change their mind. You're not going to change their mind. I mean, remember, they're using emotional reasoning to get themselves into their position. They didn't use logic and facts. It's emotional reasoning. So you're not going to try to use logic and facts to get them out of something they didn't use, actual good reasoning to get themselves into. Don't try to explain your point. Again, if it hasn't worked in the past, it ain't going to work now. So yeah, quit beating your head against a wall. Don't repeat anything you've already said. Again, if you've already said it, you don't need to repeat it 10 times over, because Lord knows if it didn't work the first 9 times, it's not going to work the 10th time. And what you can do is use I statements, for example. So again, if it's safe to do so, not everybody, can engage with somebody who's even safe enough to even use I statements, for example. But if you do have a relationship with somebody who does circular conversations, who at least is not, again, so massively abusive that your safety is in danger, you could try to use an I statement. For example, I'm feeling hurt, or I'm feeling really misunderstood right now. So again, don't try to talk about the abuser's feelings. That would be inappropriate. We don't know how they're feeling, but you can talk about your feelings and how the discussion is making you feel. Not like it's actually going to help with abusers, but you can try. And again, you can always agree to disagree. I can see we're not going to agree on this topic. Let's just drop it. So that's a good alternative too, when you can tell it's not going anywhere. And the last is hostile humor and mockery. So this is really ridiculing somebody, insulting them, claiming it was a joke. Why can't you take a joke? You're so sensitive. I was just joking. And again, this is going to destroy people's self-worth over time. If you're using hostile humor and mockery on a frequent basis with anyone, eventually you're going to tear down their self-worth and self-esteem, which is likely their intent. Again, disordered people, abusive people, they don't want to connect. They don't actually want to, have safety in relationships and to empower people. They want to have power and power over people. So their intent is not to connect with us. So yeah, we're going to be told that, if we get emotionally upset, that we're the crazy one and we're the problem. And so some examples of hostile humor and mockery are, sarcasm and snide comments. So again, passive-aggressive type of comments. Say if you're late coming home, for example, your abuser might say, "Oh, look, you remembered to come home." So again, there's tone and body language and facial expressions that are going along with this that can tell you the difference between somebody who's mocking and being hostile versus somebody who's like, "Oh, you're home." It's a totally different context, right? We all know when somebody's being hostile and mocking us. An example of mocking, for example, say if you have friends coming over and you tell your abuser, "Hey, I have friends coming over." And the abuser says, "Wow, you have friends?" So yeah, again, when you're being made fun of. All of us know when this is happening. The abuser may try to play it off as a joke, but we know when it was meant with hostility and nastiness. Ridicule, put down jokes. We become the butt of every joke. For example, in my family, what it would look like is people love to tell humiliating stories, for example. So if there was an embarrassing predicament we found ourselves in at one point in our childhood, they would bring that up and tell it to other people as like a ha ha ha, "Oh, weren't they so stupid? I know, so funny, right? Ha ha ha." Meanwhile, you're sitting there dying of embarrassment. So yeah, they'll do that type of behavior too. Another example, for example, is attacking somebody that they perceive as weak. So they might say something like, "Oh, no wonder you're always moaning about your weight. Look how clean your plate is." So again, on the surface, it's like, "Ha ha ha, I'm so funny." But clearly it's done with a nasty intention, and it's hurtful, and it's belittling, and it's mean. Um, Other examples: putting down your beliefs, your religion, your race, your heritage, putting down your friends and family. Um, and some responses, for example, you could be very direct and say, I don't appreciate that. Don't talk to me like that again. You could. You could absolutely try setting a boundary like that. Again, unlikely with abusers that boundary setting will work. What usually happens is they turn it around on you and you're the too sensitive one. Why can't you take a joke? Oh, there she goes again, complaining. Yeah, so you can try setting boundaries. Normal people will absolutely listen to a boundary. If you say stop speaking, like that, that's hurtful. They actually might apologize. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was hurtful to you. I apologize. Yeah. But again, abusers, no, you're not going to hear apologies or accountability. And again, if any of these behaviors continue to happen, despite your best attempts to, say, set boundaries, assertively speak up for yourself, gray rock and, smile and nodding and not responding, if all of these behaviors continue to happen, that's kind of your clue. You're dealing with an abusive person, and it might be time to end the relationship and remove yourself from whatever the situation is. Like, no one deserves to be treated with disrespect and to be humiliated and mocked. It's dehumanizing, and it's disgusting behavior, quite frankly, and none of us have to tolerate that. So if you are in a relationship with somebody who acts like this, please, I encourage you, you are worth far more than this. Healthy people will not treat you like this. And I encourage you to leave if you can leave and it's safe to leave. By all means, it's okay to end relationships with people who have a repeated pattern of these type of abusive behaviors. Again, it's not a relationship. A relationship, has reciprocity and respect and kindness and empathy. That's not present in all of these abusive behaviors. So please, you are worth more than this type of nasty, disrespectful behavior. So I hope you found this list helpful. Please feel free to comment below. What has your experiences been with this type of abuse? I look forward to answering any of your questions. And again, give me a like and a subscribe. Your support is so appreciated. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. Take care.